My name is Lily Harris, and I'm 32 years old. I live in a quiet, upscale neighborhood in Seattle with my husband, Ryan, who always seems to have everything under control. I was never supposed to be the type of woman who felt trapped in a marriage. I had a successful career in marketing, a cozy home, and a beautiful baby on the way. Everything looked perfect on the outside, but the truth is, I've always felt something was missing. I was never the perfect wife, not like my friends or the women Ryan admired. I was always the second choice, the one who didn't fit perfectly into the life Ryan built for us. I didn't realize how deep the cracks in my marriage ran, until the night I realized Ryan had been slipping something into my tea. He said it was for the baby, but I can't shake the feeling that he's hiding something far darker. I didn't know it then, but I was about to discover just how much danger I was in. And now, I can't even trust the man who vowed to love me. I should have known, I whispered to myself, staring at the teacup he'd just handed me, the one that tasted just a little too bitter. It was a Thursday evening when it happened. The air was thick with the usual calm of our home, the kind of stillness that made everything feel like it was just fine. Ryan had brewed me my usual cup of chamomile tea, a ritual we'd shared for years. There was nothing unusual about the way he handed it to me. No sign of his usual warmth. Just his ever-so-gentle smile. The same smile that had once made me feel safe. "It's the best thing for you, babe. You've had a long day," he said, his voice low and comforting. But this time I noticed something, a subtle but bitter aftertaste that lingered on my tongue, one that I couldn't ignore. I took the mug from him, pretending to sip, but I could feel my body tense. My stomach twisted. It wasn't chamomile anymore. I had felt it the last few nights too, but I hadn't allowed myself to fully acknowledge it until now. The bitterness wasn't normal. The tea tasted like something was mixed in it, a taste I didn't recognize, but one that seemed to seep into my bones. Ryan went to sit on the couch, scrolling through his phone, but I couldn't focus on anything but the cup in my hand. He looked up at me. "Everything okay?" His eyes, as warm as ever, stared back at me, but there was something hollow in them tonight, something unfamiliar that I couldn't quite place. "Yeah, just tired," I muttered, my voice shaky, but I knew I couldn't hide the anxiety in my eyes. "I'm going to bed early tonight," I added, hoping he wouldn't notice how strange I felt, how much I wanted to lie down and escape the gnawing dread rising in my chest. "Good idea," he said a touch too quickly. "I'll join you in a bit." He gave me one of his smiles, the kind he always gave before disappearing into his office to work late. I made my way upstairs, my mind racing. I felt it, the sluggishness, the fogginess that had been creeping up on me for weeks. It was getting harder to push past it. The exhaustion, the strange dreams, the inability to remember the night before, and the consistent drowsiness that hit me soon after the tea. It was like I was living in someone else's body, trapped in a fog I couldn't escape. And it was all happening while Ryan promised me everything was fine. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I had to know. I had to confirm my suspicions. I waited until Ryan went downstairs to finish up some work, as he always said. I pulled my phone from my bag and texted Dr. Ford. My fingers trembled as I typed. "Can I bring something to you? I think something's wrong with the tea Ryan's been making me." I hit send, and within seconds, my phone buzzed with her reply. "Bring it in tomorrow. I'll run tests." The next few minutes were a blur. I made a decision. I couldn't wait. I poured the tea into the sink when I was sure Ryan wasn't listening, replaced it with water, and rinsed out the cup. He didn't need to know. I had to make sure I wasn't imagining things. By the time Ryan came back upstairs, I was already in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Watched by him. Watched by something far worse. The next morning, I held my breath as Dr. Ford tested the sample. I could tell from her face the moment she looked at me. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. "Lily," she finally said, her voice soft but filled with concern, "this isn't right. There's something in this tea. Something that isn't chamomile." My stomach dropped. "I don't want to alarm you," she continued, her eyes scanning the paper with the test results. "But this is not something you should be consuming, especially while pregnant." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt my world shift beneath me. Ryan had been drugging me, and now, with the evidence in front of me, I couldn't deny it anymore. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the truth crash over me. Dr. Ford's voice broke through my thoughts. "Lily, you need to be careful. I don't know what's going on, but this doesn't look like a simple mistake." I didn't know what to do next. I felt like I was walking through quicksand. Each step I took felt slower and more difficult than the last. Ryan was hiding something from me, and I wasn't sure if I could trust him anymore, or if I even wanted to. But one thing was certain. I had to find out what was really going on. That night, as I climbed into bed, the familiar weight of Ryan beside me felt more like a trap than comfort. The tea was no longer the worst thing I was drinking. It was his lies, the lies I had ignored, hoping they weren't real. And just as I closed my eyes, trying to force sleep to take me, I heard his voice again, quiet, almost a whisper. "It's safe for you. Safe for the baby. Trust me." My pulse quickened, but I couldn't reply. Not anymore. Cliffhanger. And just like that, I knew I wasn't just living in a fog. I was being controlled. I couldn't ignore the feeling that had been growing in my gut for weeks. Something was wrong. I felt it in my bones. The fog that had settled over me wasn't just exhaustion. Ryan's assurances had always been enough to silence my doubts. But now I wasn't so sure. I wasn't sure about anything. I tried to convince myself it was just the pregnancy, hormones, mood swings, stress. But this wasn't stress. This was different. As soon as I stepped out of the shower, my phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Ford. "Bring the tea to me tomorrow. I'll have it tested." It was the first thing I could do. The first step toward the truth. But deep down, I was already afraid of what I would find. I dressed quickly, my hands still shaking. Ryan was downstairs, fiddling with his phone, looking busy in his usual way. I could hear him humming quietly, unaware of the storm brewing. My stomach twisted as I recalled the bitter taste of last night's tea. The bitterness had lingered on my tongue long after I had swallowed it. I'd never felt so alone. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. Was I imagining it? Was I just stressed? Or was something really happening to me? "To a future we can't escape," I whispered under my breath, remembering a quote I had once heard. It felt fitting now. There was no escaping what was coming. I walked down the stairs, careful not to make any noise. Ryan hadn't noticed me, still absorbed in his phone. I reached the kitchen and grabbed the tea bag he had left on the counter. I was going to do this. I had to. I had to know. The tea smelled like chamomile, exactly what he'd promised. But the scent didn't reassure me. It felt like a lie, like the calm before the storm. I poured the water into a mug, careful not to let my hands tremble too much. As I added the honey, I noticed something that had escaped my attention before. A small vial tucked behind the tea bags. I froze. My eyes locked on it, the feeling of dread surging within me. This wasn't the first time I'd seen that vial. I'd seen it several times before, tucked in a drawer, never really paying attention to it. But now, seeing it so close, I knew what it was. It was the same vial I'd seen Ryan reach for every night when he made my tea. The same vial he used to add the strange, bitter taste. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. He had been drugging me, and he'd been doing it for weeks. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just about sleep anymore. This was something far more dangerous. I carefully opened the vial and read the label. It wasn't chamomile extract. It wasn't anything familiar. The label was in a foreign language, but I recognized the word sedative printed clearly in English. The vial was full of something meant to put me under, to dull my senses, to keep me from remembering. I felt my legs go weak. My world spun. As I stood there, paralyzed by the truth, the sound of footsteps reached my ears. Ryan. He was coming. I quickly stuffed the vial back into the drawer, wiping my hands on my pants. My heart hammered in my chest. I needed to act normal. I couldn't let him know I was on to him. I turned to face him just as he walked into the kitchen. "Everything okay?" His voice was calm, soothing, but there was an edge to it, something I couldn't quite place. I smiled, forcing myself to look relaxed. "Yeah, just a little tired," I said, not looking him in the eye. My breath was shallow, my body tense with the weight of what I'd just discovered. Ryan didn't seem to notice. His gaze shifted to the counter, where the tea sat in the mug I had prepared. "I'll let you rest," he said with a soft smile, reaching for his coat. "I'll be upstairs when you're ready." I nodded, though every part of me screamed to run, to get away from him. But where would I go? How could I escape from the man I'd married, the man I thought I knew? As he left the room, I felt the walls close in on me. I was trapped. I had no proof, just this vial and the bitter taste on my tongue. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I met with Dr. Ford, but the moment I stepped into her office, I could see it in her eyes. She was already alarmed. When I handed her the vial, she didn't say a word at first. She just stared at it, her fingers running over the label, her brow furrowed in concern. "Lily," she finally said, her voice low, "this isn't right. This is a powerful sedative, and it's not something you should be taking, especially during your pregnancy." My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice cracking. Dr. Ford hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't know what your husband is up to, but this is dangerous. He's been giving you something that could harm the baby. I'm not sure what his intentions are, but I think you need to take action." Her words hit me harder than anything Ryan had ever said. This wasn't just a harmless mistake. He had been drugging me, and I wasn't sure why. "I need you to be careful," Dr. Ford continued. "You have to trust me. If you need to get away, do it soon. Whatever is going on, it's not safe." I felt the ground shift beneath me. The truth was finally spilling out, piece by piece, but each piece led to a darker place I wasn't ready to face. That night, as I sat in bed, staring at the empty tea mug on the nightstand, I thought about everything Dr. Ford had said. The pieces were coming together, slowly, painfully. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized I had no idea who Ryan really was. He wasn't just hiding things from me. He was hiding things from everyone. The silence in our bedroom was suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan was waiting for something, waiting for me to fall asleep, to slip deeper into the fog. He wanted me to be helpless. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. There was no escape. Not yet. But I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I would find out what he was really doing. And when I did, everything would change. Cliffhanger. I heard the sound of Ryan's footsteps in the hallway, getting closer, closer. My heart raced. He was coming back. But this time, I wasn't going to just lie there and pretend everything was okay. The phone call was a whisper in the dark. I stared at it, wondering if I should answer. It wasn't from Dr. Ford. It was an unknown number. Unfamiliar, unsettling. But I had no choice. I had to know. "Hello." My voice was a soft tremor, barely audible in the quiet of the night. "Lily, it's Detective Daniels," the voice said. "We need to talk." I felt a cold weight settle over me. I had reached out to him once, after Dr. Ford's warning, but I hadn't expected a response so soon. My hands were shaking. My heart beat too loudly in my chest. "Are you alone?" he asked, his voice tight, urgent. I glanced over at the doorway of the bedroom. Ryan was downstairs watching TV. I had a few minutes before he would come up. "Yes," I whispered. "What's going on?" "I've got something you need to see," he said. "Meet me tomorrow. I'll send the address." I hesitated. My mind was racing. What was he talking about? Why didn't he just tell me over the phone? "Please, Lily, just trust me," he urged. "You're in danger. Don't tell Ryan." The words hit me like a slap. My breath caught in my throat. Danger. My pulse quickened. The world around me tilted, everything slipping from my grasp. "I'll be there," I said before I hung up. The next morning, the air outside was crisp, but it felt like the calm before the storm. I walked to my car, each step heavy, knowing that everything was about to change. I had no idea what Daniels had found, but I knew it wasn't good. The address he sent me led me to a nondescript building on the edge of town, the kind of place that felt more like an abandoned warehouse than an office. I parked my car, looking around cautiously, feeling the weight of someone's gaze on me. There were no other cars around, no one walking by. I hesitated for a moment before stepping out. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I moved quickly, walking toward the entrance, trying to ignore the growing sense of panic. Detective Daniels was waiting inside. He was leaning against a desk, looking tired, his jacket unbuttoned. There was a grim expression on his face as I walked in. "Thank you for coming," he said. He didn't offer me a chair. "Sit down. We don't have much time." I sat, my hands folded tightly in my lap. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What did you find?" Daniels looked at me for a long moment before he spoke. "Ryan isn't who he says he is." The words hit me like a physical blow. My mouth went dry. I felt dizzy. I had been expecting a lot of things, but not this. Not this. "I'm not sure how far this goes," he continued, his voice low. "But I've been tracking some suspicious activity. Ryan's name doesn't show up on any of the legal documents I've found. No social security number. No records from before he met you. He's been living under a fake identity." I blinked, trying to process. "What do you mean?" "He's been lying to me this whole time." Daniels nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. "And it gets worse. There's a network. He's been involved with some pretty dangerous people. The kind of people who don't leave any loose ends." I felt my stomach drop. "What kind of network?" He stood up, pulling out a file from the desk. He slid it toward me. "This is just the beginning. I've been tracing his movements, his accounts. They lead to something much bigger, something illegal. And now, I believe he's been using you." I stared at the file, my hand shaking as I opened it. Inside were pictures of Ryan. No, of Victor Petro, as it said on the passport. The name hit me like a slap. This wasn't my husband. This was someone else entirely. There were other names, too. Names of people who had been part of this operation. And there in the corner of one photo was a woman, another pregnant woman, her face barely visible, but I recognized the setting. It was our home. My breath caught in my throat. He's been using me? For what? Daniels was silent for a moment, his gaze heavy. You weren't just a target for a scam. This was much more calculated. You were part of a larger plan. And now you're caught in the middle of something dangerous. I stood up, pacing, my head spinning. But why? Why me? What do they want? Daniels didn't answer at first. He grabbed his jacket and started heading for the door. Because you're a perfect mark, Lily. And they're going to come after you. Soon. I left the building feeling like the world had crumbled beneath me. My entire life had been a lie. Everything I knew about Ryan was a carefully crafted facade. And now I had to figure out how to survive in a world where my husband was someone else entirely. The drive home felt like an eternity. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following me. Every turn, every streetlight seemed to shift in the corner of my vision. I couldn't tell if I was just paranoid or if someone was actually watching me. When I arrived home, I parked quickly and rushed inside, locking the door behind me. Ryan was sitting on the couch as usual. His back was to me, but I could hear the low hum of the television in the background. I froze for a moment, staring at him. He didn't look any different. He looked the same as he always did. But the truth was now clear. He wasn't who he said he was. I moved quietly to the kitchen and began to prepare some tea, though the thought of drinking it made me sick. I had to keep up appearances. I had to keep him from knowing that I knew. I had to figure out what to do next. As I turned around, I found Ryan standing in the doorway of the kitchen. His eyes were cold, piercing, and his smile was gone. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice low and dangerous. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. Cliffhanger. Because now that you know, Lily, things are about to get a lot more complicated. I stood in the doorway, frozen, as Ryan's voice cut through the silence, steady, controlled. "You're not going anywhere, Lily. Not anymore." The words hit me like ice water. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The truth was clear now. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known I was onto him. My entire world felt like it was caving in, the floor beneath me threatening to give way. I forced myself to speak, my voice shaky. "What are you talking about?" I couldn't make myself sound calm, but I had to try. I had to keep up the facade. If he knew I was onto him, it was game over. Ryan stepped into the kitchen, his eyes dark, cold, like I was nothing more than an obstacle in his way. "You think you can just dig around, find things out, and then walk away? This isn't some game, Lily." My breath came in short bursts. "I'm not playing games, Ryan. I know what you've been doing. I know about the tea. I know about the pills." Ryan's lips curled into something that might have been a smile, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You have no idea, Lily. You have no idea what you're really involved in." I swallowed hard, but I couldn't let him see how terrified I was. "What do you mean?" My voice cracked. "What are you really doing? What's all this about?" He took a step closer, his presence so overwhelming that I felt suffocated by it. "It's bigger than you think, bigger than you can understand." I didn't know what to do with that information. "I don't care how big it is. I just want the truth." Ryan's face hardened. He was silent for a moment, studying me. Then, in a move that took me completely by surprise, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, unmarked envelope. "Here's the truth, Lily," he said, throwing it onto the kitchen table in front of me. "You'll find all the answers you need in there." I hesitated. "What's in it?" "Open it and you'll find out." My heart pounded. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to leave, but I couldn't. Not now. Not when I was so close. I reached out and grabbed the envelope, tearing it open. Inside, there was a stack of documents, bank statements, pictures, files, and one photograph in particular that made my stomach drop. The woman in the picture was familiar. It was me. But it wasn't just a photo of me. It was a photo of me in our home, from angles I hadn't even noticed before. A creeping sense of horror spread through me. Ryan watched me, waiting for my reaction. "It's all there. Every single detail. You've been part of something much bigger than you realize." I wanted to scream, to throw the papers back at him, but instead, I stood there in silence, my mind spinning. The image of myself, caught unaware, haunted me. He had been watching me. He had been watching me for months. "Why?" was all I could manage to say. Ryan's expression didn't soften. "Because, Lily, you're part of the plan. You've been a part of it from the start." I couldn't breathe. The world around me seemed to slow, the air too thick, like I was drowning in it. I glanced at the picture again. That was it, the realization. I wasn't just the victim. I was the target. The whole time, Ryan had been setting me up, but for what? His voice snapped me out of my thoughts. "You can't run, Lily. You're already in too deep. I know you've seen enough to understand, but you haven't seen it all. Not yet. This is just the beginning." I shook my head, trying to push the words out of my mind. "What is all this? Who are you really?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a slow step toward me and then another. "You've been part of a much larger operation. These aren't just petty scams. This is global. You were never supposed to know, but now that you do," his eyes narrowed. "Now that you do, we have to finish what we started." I felt my pulse spike. This wasn't just a drugging scheme. This wasn't just about control. It was bigger, much bigger, and I was caught in the middle of it. The door to the kitchen creaked open. Ryan didn't even flinch, but I froze. I wasn't alone anymore. Ryan, a voice called from the hallway. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't the voice of a stranger. It was her. The woman in the photograph. The woman I recognized from the files. The woman who had been watching me, unknowingly, from the shadows. I turned slowly, my heart racing in my chest. A woman stood there in the doorway, her eyes cold, calculating. She stepped into the kitchen, her gaze shifting from Ryan to me. Is she the one? She asked, her voice icy. Ryan didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me, his face impassive, as if I didn't matter at all anymore. I couldn't hold it in any more. Who are you? I demanded, my voice shaking. What is this? Why are you doing this? The woman smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent chills down my spine. You're asking the wrong questions, Lily, she said softly. You should be asking who else is involved. And then, just like that, it hit me. This wasn't just Ryan. This wasn't just about me anymore. There were more players, bigger players. I was just a small part of something much darker, something I couldn't yet comprehend. The woman stepped closer. You're a piece on the board, Lily, and I'm afraid your time is up. Cliffhanger. Before I could react, the lights flickered, and the sound of footsteps echoed through the house. Someone else was coming, and they weren't here to help. I couldn't breathe. Ryan had never looked at me like this before. The coldness in his eyes, the sharpness in his voice. It was like staring at a stranger. The man I had married was gone, and in his place was someone I didn't recognize, someone dangerous. The room felt smaller now, suffocating. The silence between us was thick with tension. I wanted to shout at him, to demand answers, but the words stuck in my throat. There was a heaviness in the air, like the calm before a storm. You think you can just walk away? Ryan's voice was low, almost a growl. He stepped closer, his every move deliberate, calculated. You think I won't find out? I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. What are you talking about? What did I do? His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as he closed the distance between us. You've been poking around, asking questions. And that's dangerous, Lily. You don't know what you're messing with. I could feel my pulse in my ears, each beat thundering louder. I had crossed a line. I had gotten too close to the truth. And now there was no turning back. I'm not afraid of you, I said, trying to steady my voice, but the fear was still there. What do you want from me, Ryan? Or should I say Victor? The change in him was instant. His eyes flashed with something dark, something that made my stomach turn. You're playing a dangerous game, he spat. And now, you're going to learn what happens when you do. I didn't have time to react. In the blink of an eye, Ryan Victor grabbed my arm, his grip tightening with a strength I hadn't expected. The pain shot through my skin, but I didn't scream. I couldn't. Not with him, this close. I had to think fast. I had to get away. The sound of the front door opening shattered the tension. I didn't know if it was a lucky break or just another twist in this nightmare, but I couldn't let the opportunity slip by. Lily. A voice called from the hallway. It was Emma, my best friend. She had no idea what she was walking into. Emma, get out of here. It's not safe. I shouted, trying to pull free from Ryan's grip. Victor's hand tightened, his fingers digging into my wrist. Stay out of this, Lily, he hissed, his voice dangerous. You're already in too deep. I heard Emma's footsteps stop in the hallway, but she didn't retreat. What's going on? She asked, her voice trembling with concern. What's happening here? Before I could answer, I saw her. Emma was standing there, frozen, her eyes locked on me and Victor. She could see it now. The man I had married wasn't who I thought he was, and everything was falling apart. Get back, Emma. I screamed. Get out now. But it was too late. Victor turned toward her, his eyes dark, calculating. I think you should leave now, Emma, he said, his voice cold. This is none of your business. Emma didn't move. She stood there, staring at us both, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. What have you done, Lily? she whispered, her eyes wide. What's happening? Before I could answer, Victor, pushed me against the wall hard. I gasped, pain radiating through my back, but I didn't cry out. My vision blurred for a second, but I kept my focus on Emma. Call the police! I whispered urgently, but I knew it was pointless. Even if she could, it wouldn't be enough. Victor stepped away from me, a satisfied smirk on his face. You don't get to tell her what to do anymore, Lily. I couldn't let him win. Not now. I had to do something, anything to turn the tables. My eyes flicked to the counter. The kitchen was quiet now, but my mind raced with possibilities. I needed to escape. I had to protect Emma and the baby. I pushed myself off the wall, every inch of my body screaming in pain, but I fought through it. I moved toward the knife block on the counter. Victor saw me and laughed. You think that's going to save you? But as I reached for the knife, everything seemed to slow down. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of the clock ticking in the living room. But all of it was drowned out by the thunderous beat of my heart. I grabbed the knife, and without thinking, I spun around, holding it in front of me like a shield. Victor's eyes widened for a split second before he lunged. But I was ready. The adrenaline surged through me as I jabbed the knife in his direction. He caught my wrist, twisting it, but I didn't let go. We were locked in a struggle, my arm trembling with effort, but I refused to back down. Lily, stop! Emma shouted, her voice trembling. But I couldn't hear her. I couldn't hear anything but the sound of my own breath, ragged and frantic. The fight felt endless, each second stretching on forever as I fought for control. Finally, with a swift motion, Victor wrenched the knife from my grip, tossing it aside like it was nothing. He was stronger than I had anticipated, and now I was vulnerable. I was out of options. Victor stepped back, breathing heavily, his gaze still locked on mine. You think you can outsmart me, Lily? You think you can walk away from this? You're part of it now. There's no going back. I stared at him, my heart pounding, but there was something else in me now. A fire I hadn't known was there before. Maybe, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but I'm not going to let you destroy me. The doorbell rang. The sudden sound echoed in the tense silence, and for a moment no one moved. We all stood frozen, listening. Victor's expression shifted, something dark flickering in his eyes. His hand instinctively reached for the back of his waistband, where I knew he kept a gun. But before he could make his move, the door burst open. Cliffhanger. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, shadowed, and familiar. Put the gun down, the voice commanded. You're done, Victor. The room was silent. Emma stood frozen at the doorway, her face pale, eyes wide with disbelief. The figure that had stepped into the kitchen moments before, a shadow in the doorway, was none other than Detective Daniels. He didn't hesitate. His voice was sharp, commanding. Put the gun down, Victor. Victor didn't flinch. He slowly slid his hand down to his side, fingers brushing against the cold steel of the gun. I could see the hesitation in his eyes. The game was changing and he knew it, but there was no escape now. Detective, Victor said, his voice laced with venom. This is none of your business. You should leave. But Daniels didn't move. His stance was unwavering, like a rock against a storm. It is my business. You've crossed a line. I'm taking you in. I stood there, still breathing heavily, trying to grasp the surreal nature of the moment. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion, my mind struggling to process the sudden shift in power. Just yesterday, I had been his captive, drugged, manipulated. Now he was cornered, desperate, and it felt like the entire world had shifted on its axis. Victor's eyes flicked between me and Daniels. The tension in the room was palpable. You think you've won, he sneered. You have no idea what's coming for you. Daniels took one step forward, his gun trained on Victor. It's over. You've been on the run for far too long. It ends now. In the split second that followed, The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. I turned, instinctively shielding myself. The momentary distraction was enough for Daniels to make his move. "Get down!" he shouted. There was no time to think. I dropped to the floor, heart racing, as gunshots echoed through the room. The world seemed to move in slow motion. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, a metallic taste rising in the back of my throat. When everything finally stopped, I dared to look up. Victor was on the ground, his hand clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. Daniels had disarmed him, taken control. The fight was over. "Is it really over?" I whispered, my voice barely audible as I tried to comprehend the scene before me. Daniels looked at me, his eyes softening for the first time. "It is, Lily. You're safe." The words didn't settle in right away. Safe? How could I be safe when everything I had known was a lie? When the man I loved had turned out to be a criminal, an imposter, using me as a pawn in a much bigger game. "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaky. "How? Why did he do this to me?" Daniels took a deep breath, his expression hardening. "Victor Petro, or whatever his real name is, has been part of an international identity theft ring. He's been doing this for years, targeting vulnerable women, building relationships with them, then draining their identities and resources. You were just another part of the plan, but you weren't supposed to find out." I felt the world tilt again, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "And the baby?" "Everything he was doing was to make sure you were out of the picture when the time came. The drugs, the manipulation, it was all to keep you compliant, keep you unaware." I could barely breathe, the truth settling in my chest like a heavy weight. I had been nothing more than a tool in his scheme, a means to an end. And yet I had made it. I had uncovered the lies. I looked at Emma, who was still standing in the doorway, her face filled with concern and confusion. She had been there for me through it all. But what had she seen? How much had she known? I turned to Daniels, my voice suddenly calm, though my heart was still racing. "What now?" He exhaled slowly, his gaze steady. "Now, you take control of your life. The rest of it will be handled. But you need to heal, and you will." It wasn't an easy road. There were legal battles ahead, investigations, and months of court appearances. But with each day, I started to feel the fog lifting. I began to find pieces of myself that I thought had been lost forever. The months that followed were filled with therapy, rebuilding my trust in the world, in people, and most of all in myself. I had been manipulated, controlled, but I was stronger now. I had survived, and that made me unbreakable. "You can't run from who you are," Emma said to me one afternoon as we sat in a small cafe, the sunlight streaming through the windows. "You can only move forward." I smiled, the weight of the past finally starting to feel a little less heavy. "I've learned that the hard way," I replied, taking a sip of my tea. It was different now. There was no bitterness. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. Victor was sentenced to life in prison, and the network he had been part of was dismantled. There were more victims, more women who had been taken in by his lies, but I was no longer one of them. In the end, I realized that it wasn't just about escaping. It was about reclaiming my life, my identity, and my future. I had lost so much, but I had gained something far more valuable: the strength to stand on my own, no matter what. To survive is not enough. I remembered a quote I'd once read. One must also live. And I was finally living.